Today on the Eye of Power podcast, it's my great pleasure to welcome Dagna Bieda to the show. Dagna is originally from Poland and has been in the country for 9 years in the United States. And she is a coach that works specifically with the idea of reprogramming. She comes from a technical engineering type of background and has developed systems and uses tools to help people with the software of their brain, let's say. And so it's very suited for people that are analytical, really anybody, but devoted professionals, engineers, anybody who wants to sort of reprogram themselves so that they can move forward, which perhaps is something that's familiar to you in the Eye of Power. We are always looking for ways that we kind of move forward in life to keep ourselves from just staying where we are, to make that positive change that we know will make a difference in important ways that we care about. And Dagna brings a great view, perspective, and is uniquely suited to speak on that. She's got a new book out, so we'll talk a lot about that. So help me welcome Dagna Bieda to the show. Welcome to the Eye of Power podcast. I'm your host, Tom Dardick. But this podcast is not about me. It's about you and your power. It's time to claim yours. So you're kind of an engineer, a tech girl by disposition and your experience. Is that right?
Correct.
Yet there's enough of the human side of things to get you interested in the human condition and study those kinds of things that kind of move us forward or hold us back. And of course, in the Eye of Power podcast, that's what we talk about, is the things that hold us back, the things that move us forward. So I think we're going to have a really good discussion about how, what from your vantage point, whether it be technology or approaches or those sorts of things that you've seen really make differences for people. So that's the basic thing. I just want to give you the opportunity, Dagna, to talk about your personal path a little bit, how you got to the viewpoint you have and the place in life that you've gotten.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you highlighted the fact that it's both in my background, like the technical aspect and like the human psychology and the human condition, because I am so much into like peak performance and living your best life and making sure that you kind of get past all the obstacles that are really holding you back from what it is that you can accomplish. Because I feel like we live in such an amazing time and age where so much is possible. Sometimes it's actually difficult to just decide. You could do so many amazing things with your life. Like, okay, which one do I focus on now?
That's a great point, the embarrassment of riches. And I know in the coaching world, one of the things I learned over my career is to make sure that you don't try to go from sort of the base of the mountain and just jump right to the top of Mount Everest, right? We try to get to base camp one. You have to simplify and make sure you're doing one thing at a time. And even and like you said, it's like the person that's never shopped in a supermarket to go to a huge supermarket with 40 rows. It's hard to fill a basket up because it's like
Like,
where
what
is
do
the
I
things I'm.
pick? Right?
Yeah, so and it's the same thing with the paths and approaches and things that we can do to make a positive change. So how do you frame that, just as an overall sort of approach, Dagna?
Yeah, so people that come to me that have these kinds of problems, like are unsure where to go next or how to get unstuck in their career, are usually engineers or ambitious professionals in tech. I've been in their shoes, so I completely understand what it means to be held back. And, I actually have a book that's currently launching called Brain Refactor. And the book talks about how you can optimize your internal code to thrive in tech and engineering and get more success, fulfillment, money, opportunities, impact, and growth. And I do it with my clients. I've done it successfully for the past 5 years by basically refactoring their brains. And the concept here is this kind of mesh of my technical background with that psychological interest, which means that, or in my experience, what I've observed is essentially that human brain works very much similarly to computer software. And if something doesn't work in computer software, what do you do as an engineer? Well, you hop into the code, you figure out what's not working, and then you refactor it. You reprogram what's not working so that the outcomes that you want actually start happening. And the same is very much true for the human brain. And that's why I wrote a whole book about the topic,
Uh,
seeing it over and over and over again in my own life and in my own career as an engineer, and then working with people as a coach, seeing those transformations possible within a very short time frame, because my coaching package is just 4 months. And in such a short time frame, I've seen incredible results. So, a lot is possible if you're able to kind of take on that lens, that kind of view and perspective, that who you currently are and what it is that you do, how you act, how you behave, seeing it as an outcome of a product that's your brain. If you can essentially gain that distance from you and your brain's programming, both on like the software and the hardware level, that's when you get the power to change things quickly in a very short time frame.
so this is interesting. You're taking, again, an engineer's viewpoint wants to break things down to fundamental components, break them down to the things that we can measure, observe, you know, deal with either intellectually or materially. It makes sense also that you would position yourself to serve those that think that way, that would naturally go along with the idea of, okay, look, we've got a problem here. Let's manage it. Let's keep going through this and figure out what the specific things are. Other people that are in the space that help people make positive changes might use different terms. I hear terms such as clean out the head trash or resistance. People will say there's resistance, right? So this is a nod towards the psychology that says we have stories in our heads that tell us something that frame our view of the world. And what I hear you saying, Dagna, is look, those stories are bits of informational code that is not necessarily the reality itself, but something that can be replaced, swapped out, modified, removed, whatever it might be, to produce a new effect. Do I have that right?
Precisely. Yes, Tom. What you call story in your own head, what you call the framing of the view of the world, I just call programming.
Okay.
Programming of the internal legacy code that's sitting in between your ears. And for a lot of engineers I work with, I notice that using that psychological speak doesn't work because we're like, feelings? What? Emotions? Blah. Like, no, 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 no. Give me facts. Give me the analytics. Tell me how it works and why it works that way. Right. So, yes, the concepts are very much the same, but I'm using the language that resonates with people who are not resonating with the psychological speak, basically.
I think that's fantastic. To have that lane and be clear in that, I think is very powerful. The problem with the emotional side of things, it's very fuzzy, it's very subjective. And best I can tell is not that effective because you can talk with a therapist for years and not move the needle very much. And it seems to me like plenty of therapists are fine with that arrangement. I love the fact that you're like 4 months. Give me 4 months. We're going to get rid of the code pieces that are holding you back, put some things in there and move you on your way. Doesn't mean you're done. It means you're off that particular sandbar. You're sailing till you get another sandbar.
Exactly.
We'll get you off that one next time.
Precisely, precisely. And I really love how you mentioned, therapy. I've seen therapy as very beneficial, but you're right. There's a point to you could like still have the issue and the problem, and the therapy doesn't work anymore. You hit like this glass ceiling, basically. And the way I see it with my engineering background and coaching background is essentially it's kind of like similar to how your phone operates, right? So therapy and coaching are kind of like software updates. When's the last time that you updated the software of your phone, Tom? Do you happen to remember, or did it just happen automatically?
It just happened last night. You get a notice and you can tell it not to, but generally it just goes.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where you had an older phone that you wanted to keep for whatever reason? You didn't want to upgrade to the newest hardware. You just kept your old phone because you liked it, you know how to use it, and everything was fancy and dandy until the software updates would no longer work for your phone.
Right.
Have you had that situation?
Sure.
Well, but think about it this way. If you get the newest software that is supposed to work with the newest hardware, if you don't have that hardware, you're not able to use the full capacity of the newest software,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So, how does that relate to the brain? Well, if in coaching and therapy you get the best software, the question is, what if there's something missing in the hardware layer? Maybe I downloaded the updates, but they're not working, they're not being executed because the hardware's missing, right? And how does hardware relate to the brain? We have a whole structure with neurons and synapses, and we now know that the brain changes itself throughout the entire course of a lifetime. So, are there ways where we can improve the hardware of our brain and make sure that it's able to make the benefit of the best and newest software that we have access to? Well, one way to improve the hardware of our brain is diet, right?
Mm.
Making sure that you fuel your body in the best way possible that maximizes your mental capabilities. And Dr. Amen talks a lot about that, using your diet to improve your brain. But there's also a different way. Another way to improve your hardware of the brain is doing something I've done for myself and for some of my family members, and it's called neurofeedback training. And
Yep.
that's
So
literally
you're segueing now into an area that I particularly wanted to get into, which was the technology, right? So there's a whole host of technology. So I just want to kind of frame and let you go on this track you're going on. The idea of treating yourself as, maximizing internal resources. Most people know that, they would know how to be healthier in terms of if they wanted to drop 30 or 40 or 50 pounds. It's not a mystery as to how to do that, but it might be a mystery as to how to maximize the functioning of your brain. So there's a whole menu of such technologies that's your stock and trade. So I just want to frame that up and then let you go down that road, starting where you were there, Dagna, to just keep going, and we'll get into the technologies of the future as it relates to human potential.
absolutely. But just to clarify, I don't actually do neurofeedback in my coaching. I help with the software upgrades, but I've sent many of my clients with a recommendation to find a local biofeedback clinic that could be performing either neurofeedback training. Sometimes it's also called QEEG biofeedback, because I've seen how tremendously it works. And for me, it was the explanation of why I hit a glass ceiling in therapy, because I've done a lot of things and I would come to my therapist and be like, look, I know we discussed all those things from the past and figured out what was holding me back, and I've made all these new habits and these improvements, but I still feel like there's something missing, right? And my therapist wasn't able to help me past that point. So I had to seek out something else, something different that would have helped me. And neurofeedback turned out to be that thing, that training that helped my brain rewire itself with me simply showing up to the sessions, right? So this is a topic that's not very widely talked about. That field of medicine is super young. It's like probably just 20 years old. And even though there's like 1,500 studies that have been done on showing the efficiency, the efficacy of the training and how it changes the brain's structure, I see that, from just talking to the medical people in my life, doctors, nurses, they usually haven't heard about it before I tell them about it. And I'm like, what? It's sometimes when I explain to people how neurofeedback works, they tell me, oh, this sounds too good to be true. Like, what's the catch? And the catch is just like with the phone. If you want the newest, best hardware, you got to pay for it. That's
Yeah.
really the only catch, right? And then you have to show up to the store and pick up your newest phone, which for many of us, it's um, maybe not that big of a deal. But when it comes to in paying for your brain's improvement and going into the 20, 40, 60 sessions, depending on how many you actually need, that's kind of the commitment that might sound scary. Although you did talk a little bit about diet, Tom. Would you expect a permanent effect after going to the gym 20 times?
No, of course not.
Right? Exactly. No, you would not, because that's silly, right? But with the neurofeedback, if you've been to 20 sessions, your brain has changed its structure and it's sort of permanent. I mean, unless you end up like having a car accident or hit your head and have a brain injury, it's permanent.
Wow. As you're talking and sharing about this, and you mentioned the history of it, there was a book that came out, and I think it was the late '80s, early '90s. That's when it came to me, and I read it, called Mega Brain. You ever does that
Haven't heard
Mega
about that
Brain?
one.
So it was about the brain enhancing technologies at that time. So it was a whole bunch of different things. I mean, it was like sensory deprivation chambers and some biofeedback EEGs and some light sound therapies where you can put things on your ears and your eyes and flash lights and sync up brain waves and create effects and all kinds of different things like that. And it gave me an idea. Again, this was in the early '90s, so it goes back. What are we talking? Over 30 years now. Um, and I always wanted to do it, and I haven't seen anything do it. I said because of the cost of what you were saying, it reminded me. Wouldn't it be great to have a place that was basically a health club for your mind, for your brain, that would have all these things? You wouldn't have to buy it every time. You just pay for a membership and go, 2 or 3 or 4 times a week and have your brain worked on and all these various different technologies and ways. I'm wondering, do you know, is there such a place, is there such a model exists now?
Yes. So
Okay.
it's not a unified model though, but if you search for a biofeedback clinic within your area and look into the services they provide, again, this is relatively new. So I think they're still figuring out the standardization of it,
Yeah.
but the most important thing is to understand how they operate. So the first thing that you do within the neurofeedback training is you go in for a QEEG brain map. You go in and a clinician would put this mask on your brain and then basically measure the brain waves all across different points on your head. The clinic that I went to measured 55 points that are corresponding to 55 Brodmann areas. It's a term of a scientist who basically said that this brain area is responsible for these things, this brain area for those things. And of course, there's overlap and individual differences, but it's kind of like a guide map that is serving for people to understand which brain area is related to what. So, for example, if you're very depressed, if you're extra anxious, if you have trouble planning, there might be a brain area in your brain that's either overworking itself or underworking. So, in my brain scan, after those 55 brain areas have been scanned, I had 10 that were either overworking or underworking. And moreover, when we compared the frequency that the front of my brain worked at with the back of my brain, it turned out that the front of my brain was kind of slow. And the back of my brain was like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Like overly fast, which means that a lot of the back of my brain resources, in terms of like the energy management, went to waste. It was processing noise, things that didn't matter because the front couldn't catch up with the back. So there was a lot of waste of energy in terms of how my brain was working. And I could see it after having kids. I'd be brain dead at night. Or, being a college student, I was able to party all night, go to my class, sleep 3 hours a day, and be perfectly fine and get things done. But after I had my kids, I felt like the only thing I could do after 5 p.m. was binge a show on Netflix, and that's it, because my brain was not capable of focusing anymore.
Well, you just kicked up a whole bunch of thoughts in my head here.
Yeah,
um,
let's dive in.
so one thing that I'm wondering is how this, in your view, relates to how sort of the traditional measurements of IQ. And because you were talking front brain, right brain, but you also hear, of course, a left brain, right brain. And being somebody who's technical, we would say, oh, that's a left brain person. Or somebody who is perhaps less so, we say, oh, they're a right brain person. And these are very broad models that we're using, of course. And as we learn more with neuroscience, people don't realize how rapidly the field of neuroscience is advancing. We literally double our knowledge every few years, and it's really going up and up and up and up, and it's marvelous because we have these old paradigms, right, where we say, okay, you have this IQ and you're not this smart, but what you're pointing to, Dagna, is the ability to get yourself in balance, get yourself maximized, and get out of perhaps the old paradigms that might say, well, I can't do that, or I'm not smart, or I that's just not me, or any other sort of limiting factor that we might adopt. What's your view as it relates to somebody who thinks, oh, they took an I? Oh, it's not even what they think; it's what other people tell them. Perhaps, oh, you're not that smart, or oh, you know, you're destined for this. What's your view on that element of it? Would you say,
Okay,
Dagna?
so there's a lot of things to unpack here as well too, right? Because first of all, a lot of the time when we get like condescending remarks like that, usually they're projections. They
Yeah,
don't necessarily mean a lot about us, but they tell us about what the person who said that believes about themselves or the world around them, right?
yeah, yeah. That's
So
true.
that's number one. Number two, what you are referring to is what we believe to be true about ourselves or the world around us, whether that's true or not. And that's the software part, right? These are our thoughts, our beliefs, what we think, and we can refactor all that. So that can change, right? The hardware piece is really how the hardware of the brain is connected, how your brain is processing information. And the question with the hardware part, with how the brain is wired, it's more about whether it's efficient at, at doing what it's supposed to do, or is it inefficient at doing what it's supposed to do, right? So if you're experiencing sleep issues, for example, it could come from the fact that your brain is currently dysregulated, and it's a hardware problem. There's no amount of positive thoughts that are going to change that. With that also being said, something to take into account is this concept that I mentioned earlier, which is neuroplasticity. Our brains, what we know from neuroscience, they develop most rapidly from 1 to 5 years of age and then in teenage years, but they don't like wrap up the basic configuration of our mind until we're like 28 or 30 years old. But they still continue to change depending on how we live our life due to this concept of neuroplasticity, which brings us to this next like very intriguing chapter, which is psychedelics, because psychedelics really allow to rapidly change things for the better in a very short amount of like time frame. Like we're talking about a weekend. And I had my own psychedelic experience, which was phenomenal. And I did it at the end of like first doing therapy, then doing coaching, then doing the neurofeedback training. And it felt like my brain was in just the perfect spot to actually benefit from that experience of consuming a psychedelic. And I feel like I've gained a lifetime of wisdom that people, the kind of insights that people get on their deathbed. And I got them in a weekend at 30 something. And I don't think I'll ever have to do it again. But I do highly recommend looking into it if someone is very interested in personal growth, because the reason I did it, the psychedelics, it was kind of like this documentary that I binged with my brain being dead after 5 p.m. that I mentioned earlier because I had young kids. I watched a documentary in which a neuroscientist was measuring the outcome, like how the brain was changing its activity for a person actively under influence of a psychedelic. I believe it was ayahuasca or magic mushrooms. And the scientist said that for a lot of people who come in and out from his lab as he was doing his research, they would say it felt like 10 years of therapy in a weekend. Because you're the therapist and you're the patient, and it's all happening in your brain. So there's nowhere to hide. There's no way to lie, right? There's no way to turn a blind eye to some topics you don't want to even touch. And I thought 10 years of therapy in a weekend, sign me up. Because I experienced talk therapy for several months and it was very much an improvement. And then I was like, I can get more of that? Yes, 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 you know?
Well, I want to say a couple things about psychedelics because I'm old enough where psychedelics were vilified, and obviously a lot of kind of bad information about it, where people thought, "Oh, I'm going to be addicted to if I take LSD, I'm an addict," and they had really no understanding about if you don't know that much about the world of drugs, it kind of just becomes this big scary monster and it becomes all bad. And that's not a real clear lens to look through. It's not to be treated lightly. I think
Absolutely not.
what these drugs do is they put you in a altered state that like one effect might be anything that's good feels amazingly good, like heavenly. And anything that's bad feels amazingly bad, like hellish. So it spreads the subjective view of experience. It like amplifies it to extremes. Just as sort of a warning tale, I was not there. This is a friend of mine I met my first year in school who had the previous year had this experience, and he didn't end up staying in school. I mean, he was really messed up from it, and he had a really bad experience while he was tripping. I don't know that he would ever. I mean, maybe he recovered, but maybe not. You don't take it lightly. It has to be under controlled circumstances, and what you're talking about is a therapy with a powerful tool. It's not like
Exactly,
it's
precisely. And
not
I'm
like
glad you're pointing it out. Yes,
yeah, it's not like, oh, cool, let's do mushrooms and see what happens. And while it can be fun, but it really is such a subjective and also it's a wild kind of thing. In other words, the circumstances need to be fairly controlled. If they're not, you can spin out of control and cause not physical necessarily, but maybe physical as it relates to the neuroplasticity, but it can cause long effects that you don't want if it's not really managed properly. So we're talking about a very powerful technology that needs to be under clinical circumstances. You're screened to make sure that things are not crazy in your life, because if you've got some things going on bad and you go undergo these kinds of things, it can seem like really bad and throw you way out of whack. So
I totally agree.
I just want to lay that all out, but none of that means that the tool isn't powerful. None of that means that it couldn't possibly be an answer to really cause a breakthrough for a lot of people. So we have to be responsible with these things and open and clear-eyed about it, and not just say, oh, that's for kooks.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm gonna add to it because you did mention trying it out in school. So your brain was probably not ready for the experience, right? You were not above the 30, your brain wasn't mature enough to process the kind of difficult experiences that might arise during psychedelic trip. So that's very important. I did my tripping also in a legal and safe environment with medical oversight. There were probably like 40 or 50 people tripping with me. We had like 15 volunteers and a doctor and a nurse on staff who had probably their finger like right on top of 911 call in case something would have had happened. Fortunately, nothing did. But you're very right. It's something that needs to be taken under careful consideration. But that's also where neurofeedback training comes in. Because whenever you're doing your QEEG brain map, a skilled clinician can tell you whether or not your DMN, the default mode network in your brain, is healthy or not. And if it's not, a lot of research has shown that you are more prone or at risk for having bad outcome from consuming psychedelics. So having done the neurofeedback training, I did ask my clinician, like, hey, what are the chances that I'm going to have a bad trip or not come back? Because I was worried. I had young kids, a young family to take care of. I couldn't just throw it all away to go and trip, and have
Mhm.
fun. Right. And there's also different doses. What you mentioned sounded more like a recreational dose, not necessarily the heroic dose of psychedelics that's used in a therapeutical setting. But yes, anyone listening interested in that, I highly recommend doing your own research. And I particularly love this series on Netflix called How to Change Your Mind. That's based on book and narrated by the author. And I found it tremendously inspiring and tremendously informative. And you talked about drugs being vilified. One thing that's interesting is like how the bad drugs were, vilified, but then the good drugs led to an opioid epidemic that we're
Yeah.
facing right now. So clearly we got something wrong back then, right?
Well, our view on substances, there was a study done by a British researcher that came out in, I think it was 1973, on the effects of sugar. And basically, the conclusion was that if we use the same standard for physiological effects, it would be a controlled substance. So,
Sugar, right?
yeah,
Okay.
and of course, we went through prohibition with alcohol, and that didn't work out so well in the United States. Alcohol is extremely powerful, right? It doesn't seem like it because it's just normalized in society, but it's every bit as powerful as almost anything else that we consider doing recreationally. So our views on this are a little askew. And what I love about your approach, Dagna, is you're saying, look, there's these technologies that can help, and you got to be responsible and careful, but don't cut yourself off just because you've had this story like, okay, I don't do that kind of a thing. That might be self-limiting. Also, what we're learning, it's a different day than it used to be too. People have to understand that aspect of it too. What we understand of how things function physiologically are a long way to go. Long way to go, but a long way from where we were even 20 years ago.
Yes, and I want to kind of highlight what you mentioned too, the cultural influence, right? Me being an immigrant, I work a lot of with either people who are immigrants to United States or grew up in immigrant families, because a lot of the time how we were brought up and the values that we bring from home, from that different cultural setting, don't necessarily serve us in our careers in tech or engineering in the United States, because that's a different cultural setting. There are different values, there are different expectations, and sometimes it's very nuanced. And the way that I see it, and it kind of applies to what you mentioned a second ago too, Tom, is that cultural influence, it's also part of your internal legacy code of your programming. So
Right, so it's hard to change.
it's really about diving into the code and understanding, okay, does this code that's being represented as thoughts or beliefs, does that serve me? Or is it just something that my life experience has put into my mind, but it's no longer serving me? Maybe I should let that go and reprogram.
So one of the things that we see in the world today, especially we're talking in an election season where there's lots of stray bits of code in the world, right? Stray bits of, you could call them thought viruses or mind viruses that are designed to get you to think a certain way. Whether you're on the left or the right or whatever, these things exist on both sides. It's a way to get people to think the way you want them to. And so taking responsibility for your code, your programming, seems to me like it's not even something that's a luxury. It seems to be mandated if you want to maximize your own personal power in this world. What's your view as far as that comment, Dagna?
Well, what I've seen in my coaching career, working with other people, is that a lot of the time that the obstacles that we're facing turns out that we are the obstacle. So you're very right in the sense of being aware how your own mental programming is working, what it is that you care about, and what is it that you value. What is it that you want to put out into the world? That's very much it. Taking ownership of how your own mind works, other than just being like a leaf on the wind, blown by the circumstances around you. But it does take maturity. It does take growing up. It does take getting to that point in your life where you're ready to take ownership over what it is that you're going, and whether that's in an election or not, just living your life, how you want to show up, and what it is that you want to do with your life. It's important to look into that code and understand where it came from, why is it structured the way it is, and where do you want it to take you? What is it that you want to improve in order to get better outcomes in your own life?
One of the things that you said earlier that it made me think of the movie Forrest Gump.
Okay.
Uh, you're familiar with the movie?
Yes, love the movie.
And the superpower of Forrest Gump was that he was not a smart person. And because of that, anything he put his mind to, anything he put his limited mental power, but he would put 100% because he didn't have room for all the other noise. Like I was thinking about this when you were talking about the background noise going crazy and the calm kind of, couldn't keep up in the front. And I was thinking, there's power in simplicity. There's power in making the main thing the main thing. And that story, I think, isn't partly an allegory about the power of focus and the power of being pure and 100% on the thing that you're focused on. How does that observation play into your view in terms of how you help people and some advice that you might have for people?
I think from what you're saying, Tom, it's the importance of just getting clear on what it is that you want to do and just focusing on that, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, like again, going back to Forrest Gump, he was a perfect soldier because all he did was exactly what the what the person told him to do. He, or he's great at ping pong because don't take your eye off that ball, and he's like, so he could play that out without any distraction. And like, even being a good friend or even a good father, complicated things, but really made simple. And I don't mean to be reductionistic saying that these complicated things are in fact simple. What I mean is, echoing what you said about the values, making sure that you don't lose sight of what matters more than what because of whether it be the programming or the distractions of life that can come up.
Yeah, a lot of the time we're not even aware what it is that we're chasing and why we're chasing it.
Yeah.
And I could tell you that one of the tools that I've learned as I ended up in therapy as a result of mix of burnout and postpartum depression was that I didn't understand my own values. And for example, striving in a corporate environment for that next promotion, for me, it was really that conditioning of wanting to make my parents proud. But
Yeah.
was that my core value? No, it wasn't. And when I realized, when I made the connection in, okay, this is not necessarily serving me anymore. I don't have to please my parents now that I have my own family and I moved out. Now I can focus on what it is that I really want from life. And in my case, that's having deep and meaningful conversations and having impact on people's lives, which is what I get to do in my coaching, allowed for me to transition from being a 9 to 5 salaried employee to having my own business and pursuing what lights me on fire and brings me fulfillment, making me then also a more productive member of my society, because now my cup is overflowing and I have the energy to give, right? Instead of being burned out and just kind of taking the punches in.
You have a chance to give your gifts, right? And when you're in the corporate lane, I don't know if you work with organizations. When I work with organizations, I'm trying to help them with their people strategy. So I'm trying to make as much room. One of the ways I define leadership is to get a clear vision that's shared, but to be able to take that shared vision and make it personal to each person that you encounter in the team. So in other words, to find what their gifts are, to find what their motivating values are, so that and then tether those, get them in alignment so that we do feel fulfilled and feel like we belong and feel like we're in a place where we're not wasting our life. We're doing what we want to do. And if that's not in alignment, then you get in the burnout phase. You get in you don't feel seen, appreciated, taken advantage of, wasting time. All those sorts of negative and painful thoughts come in.
So I see
And
that we have a complementary approach, right? You're working with the top people, kind of like streaming that vision from the top. I work with the people that are more so on the bottom, let's call it, of the corporate ladder, and individual contributors. And I help them understand whether or not they fit into that picture, if
yeah,
it's clearly defined, or
yeah.
whether it's time for them to move on.
Most situations, because when you get down to values, there isn't there's a lot of difference in terms of the basket of values, right? Because each person has it's like a fingerprint, right? You have a set of things that you care about in different amounts and in different orders that is unique to you. But
At
what
different times in life, too.
yes, exactly. That evolve and change, of course, as we grow and mature and life circumstances change. Having said that, what those each one of those things are there's it's a finite and fairly universal set of things. So the job of a leader, a coach, a therapist, a person that just wants to come alongside somebody and help somebody is customized to the person, but simplified in the fact that there's so many things that are universal too. So I say all that because I want to ask you about the common patterns or the common things that you see as you work with clients, just to have maybe some tidbits for the listener. What maybe a couple things that they might think about
Yeah,
as a
absolutely.
takeaway from our conversation?
So I do have that in my book, upcoming book called Brain Refactor, that's available on Amazon. And the four things that I commonly see for the individual contributors that I work with, well, not really just individual contributors, because I do work with people in the management, engineering manager positions as well, or like CTOs of like early stage to mid-sized startups. And what I've seen, the four very common patterns that often occur is number one, burnout. Number two, imposter syndrome. Number three is trouble dealing with other people. And number four, it's self-marketing struggles. And especially for engineers or people with very technical background, as we're going through our education, our curriculum, there's so much stress being put on the technical side of things, on the technical skills, technical way of thinking, that a lot of the time we tend to, as engineers, and I know because I've been there and that held me back in my career, is that we overvalue the technical skills, while the people skills that are equally or even more important sometimes are completely undervalued or even missing from the educational agenda. So a lot of the time when I work with engineers who are brilliant and get passed over for a promotion and they're like, what is going on? It's because of that bias, right? Of that overvaluing of the technical and undervaluing of the people, of the soft skills. So, as I work with my clients, my role is really to help them to figure out what are the gaps in their mindset or their skill set and try and fill those in, right? I like to say that I move from programming computers to reprogramming human minds because that's what I do with my clients. And a lot of the time, that's all it takes, a shift in perspective, one aha moment, understanding why you're being held back in your career. Why are you stopping yourself from getting to that next step? And how is all that stemming from your internal programming? And in my book, with those four things that are most often holding people back, there are four chapters that are dedicated to basically case studies of my past clients, plus the science of how it all works, so that whoever reads the book can take those insights and try and apply them in their own life. And of course, if just having that DIY following along the book approach doesn't work, they can always come and work with me.
Absolutely. One of the things that we understand in the Eye of Power community is that we all have blind spots that we cannot see ourselves. And that means, for better and worse, I think it's a beautiful thing that we actually do need other people. We need each other. And, I think that's ultimately a wonderful thing because I think that's how we feel fulfilled and feel joy and relates to what we are talking about earlier about finding our path and finding our gifts that we can help and give others. And it's wonderful that you found that for yourself and that you're empowering others to do the same thing. And the types of people that are in technology that are naturally driven toward tasks and logic and rationality and figuring out systems and the engineering how to and all those sorts of things. There's trade-offs in life. So when we tend to focus our brain power and our attention and our value there, sometimes it's at the cost of the warm and fuzzies, the people side, the relationship side, all that. And it's classic, right? It's a classic scenario. All organizations tend to, that have these kinds of tasks, which is most, have this problem with those kinds of personnel. The four things you talked about: burnout, imposter syndrome, trouble talking with others or dealing with other people, and then the self marketing, understanding, okay, what's my value and what's my lane and how do I communicate that? How do I be real clear about that? Those are things that are important for no matter who you are. So I think it's a great way for us to sort of wrap things up by just focusing in on taking stock right in yourself. Absolutely, if you're the kind of person that relates to any of the things that we talked about, please go out right now and get Dagna's book because it's going to open some things up for you. And then if you've got any questions, we'll make sure that the contact information and all the stuff is in the links and the description so that they can easily contact you. Is there anything else you want to add, Dagna, that we didn't touch on in our discussion?
Well, one thing that was a very heartwarming comment that my book received on Amazon, one of the very first reviews that it got, is that even though the language is very much tech driven, it's not just for engineers. It's for any ambitious professional out there who wants to improve and get past the obstacles so that they can pursue the goals that they're striving for, whether that's money, opportunities, or impact, or growth, or all of these things. So that was really beautiful thing for me to see. And
I'll bet.
one thing that I've been always chasing in my career was impact. And I truly believe that my book has this ability to impact people's lives. And that makes me so happy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with me today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I had a blast.
Thanks again, Dagna, for being my guest today. Very much enjoyed our conversation. Uh, I love diving into the weeds in terms of the types of things that we can do to move forward. There's no shortage of tools, obviously, no shortage of options for people. And the things that bring us together on that is, move forward, develop, do something. Don't go it alone. Get Dagna's book, read it, see if it moves something for you. If you have a question, reach out to her. Um, Obviously, with the Eye of Power, that's something that we do. We're creating communities of people that support each other in moving forward. And that's what it's about, really. It's about being more of the fulfillment of the potential and the real you, the fullest expression of yourself. And we're in our own ways, and some of that is the programming that we have in there, to use her term, little bits of code, these little things that we believe, however they got there, that keep us thinking a certain way, that limits our behaviors and the range of actions that we're able to take and sustain. And by getting that kind of help and intentionally moving those things out of the way, uh, or alter them, change them, replace them with something that serves us, we gain more of our power and gain more of our ability to craft the life that we really want to live. So thank you for that. We didn't get too much into details of the neurofeedback and the technology there. I'm a little familiar with it. I'm actually, after our conversation, what I'm really left with and my takeaway is I'm going to look into that. What are the facilities that might be near me, and how can I work that into my plan for my improvement? So I'm going to follow that up, and I appreciate that 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 came up and her bringing that to our table here. Uh, it does remind me also that there's some new technology. I'm licensed through TTI Systems, and they've been working in this space where now this is a psychometric uh, company that uses different sciences to try to understand our behaviors. And they've been busy for a number of years now matching the technology. So mapping of the brain, seeing where the neurons are firing as it relates to our actual thoughts and behaviors, and making those connections. So sometime in the future, they anticipate having it where you can actually have a machine that tells you some things that really are precognitive. A lot of our responses are happening before our cognitive mind even kicks into gear. So we're in an exciting time where technology is at a point where um, we really can throw off a lot of the shackles that have held us in place for so long. So thank you for listening to us, and I appreciate, again, Dagna, for being my guest today on the iPower podcast. Be well. This has been the Eye of Power podcast with Tom Dardick. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd also like to thank my brother, Scott Dardick, for the music and his music production. If you'd like to reach me, simply email Tom at dardickcommunications.com